Good morning once again, colleagues. It is my pleasure to present to you the Commission's presentation on Grenada's anti-corruption regime and best practices as led by Grenada's Integrity Commission. I also have with me this morning the current acting heads of compliance and investigation, and they are here to field any practical questions that you may have. And I say this because these are the folks who, when declarations are filed, when investigations are underway, they take the lead. So please, right up front, I ask you to start thinking as I speak about the questions that you may have. Now, Grenada began its journey of the creation of an anti-corruption system, an anti-corruption sector, with the ratification of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, ratified in 2002. Subsequently, Grenada acceded to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption in 2015. So let us look just very briefly at the aims of the conventions. The OAS Inter-American Convention Against Corruption is a regional one, and its main aim is to promote and strengthen the development of its states parties of the mechanisms needed to prevent, detect, punish, and eradicate corruption. Oversight mechanism is the MISISIC, which sits at the OAS headquarters in Washington. More recently, having acceded to the UN Convention Against Corruption, and this particular convention is the one that is more, I would say, readily acceded to across the region. And I would say by all of our regional organizations, commissions, even more than the regional one to which Grenada first acceded. The main aim of the UNCAC is to subscribe global frameworks to harmonize anti-corruption efforts worldwide. And the mechanism for this treaty implementation is the UNODC, and its headquarters is in Vienna. Grenada did domesticate legislation pursuant to the regional treaty that I just shared on the Inter-American Treaty. And in 2007, we had here in Grenada the Integrity in Public Life Act. That act of 2007 was later repealed. It repealed the first act and replaced it with a 2013 act. Still existing and subsisting with some amendments is the Prevention of Corruption Act number 15 of 2007. These pieces of legislation bring to life the aims of the regional and later the international treaty provisions and aims. Grenada's commission, Integrity Commission, is an independent one. The first appointments were done in 2010, some 8 years after the passage of the Integrity in Public Life legislation. Thereafter, I must say to you and share with you, especially colleagues from integrity commissions, that just like your commission, Grenada's commission emerged from ground zero. There was nothing there. So the first 7 persons approached refused after they realized the responsibility and weight that would be on their shoulders. Thereafter, after many rotations, the first 7 commissioners were appointed in 2010, January 2010, and many also left due to professional and personal commitments and the requirement of the legislation to file their declarations. That is, all of their assets and liabilities had to be filed with Her Excellency or His Excellency, the Governor General. 3 original commissioners remain today. Much work has been done behind the scenes and continuously, not just by the commissioners, but also by its hard-working team, which saw the establishment of this quote-unquote independent commission. And of course, the commission eventually became operational in 2014. Thus, an anti-corruption sector has been established in Grenada and facilitated by this commission. There are several legal mandates required of the commission by the Integrity in Public Life Act, and the first of these is to receive asset declarations. And many of you who would be on this Zoom platform may have yourself declared, filed asset declarations, or you may have heard of filings of asset declarations. Section 12(1)(b) of the IPL, as I will now say, the first schedule requires 33 categories of persons to file their asset declarations with the Integrity Commission. This in practice, and following the guidelines of the UNCAC, the UN Convention Against Corruption, aligns with Article 5.2 of that convention. To date, the Commission has received a total of 959 declarations, and they have been declared by mainly parliamentarians, judicial officers, magisterial realm, customs officers, police officers, prison officers, and public officers from ministries and departments, as well as statutory bodies. This is progressing well as we widen the net of declarants and declarations. We share with you that Grenada's system is not a post office. Declarants do not just declare and leave their declarations with the Commission. The Commission has a very active compliance process which reviews and red flags the declarations in its custody. That means as well that these will also be processed to investigations down the road where it is observed that there are some issues to be addressed by declarations. But before it gets to such a stage of investigations, because we have done so much to be a user-friendly organization or Integrity Commission, we would very often check with the declarants themselves, requesting further information. And once we receive that, well, then we will revisit those declarations. What it also helps us to do is to ensure that we are building not only a baseline of declarants, where they're from, but also the trends as we are now into, in some cases, at least 3 rotations of receiving of declarations. Well, then we can trend and observe what is happening as we cross-reference these declarations received via the compliance process. We are guided by a compliance manual, a declarations and compliance manual, which guides the process. Our organizational compliance is also implemented because further to section 12 subsection 1 F and G, the Commission is also required to examine the practices and procedures of public bodies. When we examine those practices and we share, and we do trust that many of our colleagues from statutory bodies are with us today, we are then open to ensuring that we can give guidance in this regard. And for us, we here would positively flag the GIDC of Grenada, which came to us to ask for assistance, not only in meeting and training its staff in this regard, but themselves preparing an anti-bribery and anti-corruption manual, which they asked the Commission to review and sign off on for its implementation in that statutory body. Our Act also mandates that we investigate, and this is further to sections 12, subsection 1, D and E, F and G. Many of the investigations that we pursue will come from complaints which are received from members of the public and sometimes from private sources. Even though Grenada does not have a formal whistleblowing regime, Section 16 of the Prevention of Corruption Act does provide for protected disclosures. So we do share with you that in the course of our investigations, we would either have been initiated or supplemented by protected disclosures. So as you see, information comes from stakeholder groups, public officers themselves, and we have taken upon ourselves as a matter of policy to sift through information garnered from the media reporting for our analysis and in some cases action. To date, the Commission has undertaken 12 investigations. 4 of them are currently active. The recent MNIB, Marketing and National Importing Board investigation, is perhaps the most well-known one to date. And following the end of court proceedings, that investigation is now very much alive again. We are also mandated to carry out public education and outreach pursuant to Section 12(1)H of the IPL Act. And as you can see, we have done quite a lot in this regard. And as we speak a little bit to our best practices shortly, you can see our migration onto our social media platforms as a result, especially of the COVID-19 environment. So we have definitely taken the opportunity to enhance the use of the e-tools for this mandate. We also utilize the World Anti-Corruption Day in December each year to ensure that that in itself is a public education platform for the citizens of Grenada, Carriacou, and Martinique. We are also required to implement a code of conduct pursuant to sections 40, 41, and the 6th schedule of our IPL. So for the first time in Grenada's history, we are implementing a code of conduct for public officials, and that code, it addresses conflict of interest, incompatible outside interest, political or public activity, reaction to improper offers, susceptibility to influence by others, and information held by public boards. This code is supplemented in large measure by the requirements of the Prevention of Corruption Act in how public officials and officers must treat with issues of their conduct. And as a result of that, we have also begun a responsive conflict management procedure, which is presently being rolled out to our stakeholders, and much more will be discussed around this area during this conference and beyond. So, as a result of not only being established, but being operational and receiving much training and development opportunities, especially through the Commonwealth Secretariat. And as a result of that, we can never stop thanking our own Dr. Roger, because he has offered and we have accepted. This particular commission is like a sponge when it comes to training and opportunities. We have seized every opportunity that has come our way, commencing with going off to Singapore very early, I believe, in 2011, when we first interacted with Dr. Collintang, and he was invited to come. He did come. We took him up on his offers, and he took us up on our acceptance. We have also been receiving training, particularly with respect to the filing of declarations from the UNODC, and we have had world-class specialists come from their offices in Vienna as well as Panama to ensure that Grenada is not a post office. So we have been developing an evolving methodology for the filing of declarations, which in itself is a best practice because it now adopts the offering of a notice to file, which provides clear instructions for the declarations form, along with the declaration form when it is sent to declarants. There's a clear date and a time for filing. We have implemented a pre-screening process with a compliance officer before each filing by declarants. There is also face-to-face filing of declarations before 2 commissioners and/or technical senior staff of our commission. And we later learned that this is a best practice in our region. We have also taken feedback from our declarants, and presently we await the return of an upgraded form from the Ministry of Legal Affairs via updated regulations. Our chain of custody is seen as another best practice, and following the declaration process, all declarations received on that day are recorded and secured. It is then taken to a secure location under the custody and care of 2 officers at any given time. Records are made of this custody process. We flag here that confidentiality is very, very high on our declaratory process as required by our regional Inter-American Treaty. I do point out today that there is, however, some tension between our regional convention and process, which is domesticated in our laws, and the UNCAC treaty approach, which requires a more transparent and open approach. And we know that we will eventually migrate to filing of declarations online, and that will probably be hastened by this particular COVID new normal experience that we are all together living through. Another best practice is our systems assessment, which approach has been accelerated once again as a response to the COVID lockdown and social distancing methodologies. And this particular systems assessment is particularly directed to our public bodies and statutory corporations in particular. And this requires the administering of a series of questions by a survey monkey method, and you can Google that, I'm sure. And the questionnaire contains a mixture of closed and open-ended questions with a supplemental page for explanations. Following the return of this questionnaire analysis is undertaken by the in-house team of the Commission. As you would have realized by now, after hearing Dr. Corenteng's discussions on an anti-corruption strategy and his sharing that Grenada has all of the building blocks required for the implementation of an anti-corruption strategy, we would share with you that this is because of the Integrity Commission's approach to stakeholder engagement. And on your screen, you would see some of the evolving stakeholders with whom we engage. We have upped the game on that stakeholder engagement by the implementation of a round table mechanism, which once again was inspired by Dr. Rogers' suggestions that perhaps, like those in Africa and other jurisdictions around the world, that we adopt a round table mechanism. We did, and this inclusive engagement, which historically includes so many sectors and groupings, including civil society within our national society, is indeed a best practice. Most recently, we're there. You should have a conflict of interest management best practice. And just to share that as a response to public concerns, perceptions, that we here in the Integrity Commission have ourselves, by example, adopted a conflict of interest management protocol and system. That means that wherever for our commissioners or our staff, there may be a perceived or even a real conflict of interest as provided for by the code of conduct that I referred to before exists, we would ensure that there is a declaration of that conflict or interest, and we would recuse and completely excuse ourselves where that happens. This process is also being rolled out in collaboration with the rest of the public service management. And we encourage you both here in Grenada and those of you who have joined us throughout the region to adopt such a system, because it will help with perceptions of conflict of interest and corruption for those of us who want to serve in the public service or serve as public officials and leaders in our societies. Our next best practice that we have adopted is a gift registry, and this is done pursuant to sections 45 and 46 of the IPL and section 3 of the Prevention of Corruption Act. And this requires all public officials, in accordance with the legislation, not to accept gifts or gratifications without the required disclosure. And the Commission, along with the Accountant General's Office, determines whether the gift is a personal gift or a state gift. If it is a state gift, it will be lodged to the custody of the Accountant General's Office. We are very happy to report that we have already, since we have begun the training and sensitization throughout our public service, we have already received a first declaration coming from a very, very responsible agency, the Royal Grenada Police Force. Next, training and development. I think I have indicated that we are doing already, that we are doing a lot of training, in particular through the Commonwealth Secretariat and their anti-corruption division headed by Dr. Corenteng, as well as the UNODC. Of note, in particular, not only have we sought to do a wide outreach to public officers, political parties, churches, civil society, but I believe Grenada now has the best practice record of meeting with members of cabinet and parliamentarians and sharing and training them on these issues, just as the rest of you would have been trained. This indeed speaks very well for the inclusive political will for culture shifting in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique with respect to embedding and implementing integrity and anti-corruption principles. Next, as you would see, we have prepared with much effort and with the assistance of much technical help from our donors. And here I must also flag the CCAICAB, the regional anti-corruption organization, which was actually founded right here in Grenada. We have developed several manuals, and I trust that the current chairperson of the CCAICAB, Mr. Dirk Harrison, himself a former contractor general of Grenada, of Jamaica, is here with us, and he did assist in Grenada's investigation protocols and policy and procedures manual, and it's in its second edition and updating as a result of him literally coming to Grenada over the last 2 years and working not only with the Integrity Commission, but with our other stakeholder partners in the Royal Grenada Police Force and the FIU and the DPP's chambers to ensure that this is wholly now owned in accordance with international principles and best practices by the Grenada stakeholders. So thank you very much.